All right, everyone. This is week 8 PowerPoint. This is so awkward doing it on Zoom too. So awkward. Okay, I'm gonna share a screen and get to it, so don't waste time. I'm gonna make this efficient. Presentation mode. Bah. Okay, writing interventions. Um, Writing is critical. You're gonna see in all throughout the literature, it's extremely important. It's one of the main ways that we communicate. Without writing, we wouldn't have expanded to the science that we have today, right? Think about it. Somebody was discussing me like how um, they passed things on along tradition back in maybe 6,000 years ago, and how things were accurate because their traditions were tight. And I'm like, no, they couldn't write their information down, so they were probably a lot inaccurate. Imagine telephone by thousands of years. So the reason why communication is so important, especially writing, is because it helped expand and make things more accurate. And as we became more accurate, we were able to build, and that's where technology is actually be able to come from, is being able to write things down, code things, so on and so forth. The National Commission on Writing underscores the importance of writing proficiency in the modern global economy. And after the 1970s, the boom of technology, that changed the game for our students. 40% of the jobs that will exist 10 years from now don't exist right now. And those jobs are a lot going to have to do with writing. Basic things, especially with the technology. We got to learn how to email, we got to learn how to text, we got to learn how to communicate through written form and technology. So this is the big thing, is as important as it is to know how to write, our kids are graduating without the skills of writing right now. And the main deficit that we're seeing is handwriting, which is, man, I got terrible at that. Spelling, capitalization, sentence formation, sustained effort, right? Who thinks it's hard to sustain that effort during writing? And organization. It cracks me up. It's kind of like, I feel like that listed all the things I struggle with. Here's the part of the brain where it really impacts. So the frontal lobe, that has to do with involved in the decision making, planning, task initiation. Think of that. That's the executive functioning. That's where we always see the frontal lobe. Hippocampus formation and retrieval of memories. So when you're trying to plan, you're trying to get information so that you can use in the writing process. That's where the hippocampus takes place. Um, the Broca's, right here, if you see my mouse, the Broca's area, that converts memories and thoughts into actual words that can be written down. Wamiki's area, middle, the other part of the middle, help students read and understand what they and others have written. Occipital lobe helps students visualize what they're writing as well as process the visual spatial information involved in writing. And then you got the motor area. Executives it executes the coordinated fine motor movements required to physically write and type. And you got the conduit nucleus. That's another part of the brain. It's the last part of the brain that's involved in writing. It coordinates in connections between all interrelated neural area involved in the places of certain skills, such as writing, connections strengthened with additional practice. Here's the different areas of the brain. Hippocampus. There you go. Learning disabilities in writing, also known as dysgraphia. There's 3 different dysgraphias that we'll talk about later on. I'm going to go through a few slides of the dysgraphia presentation. May be a result of insufficient connectivity between interrelated neural areas linked to essential writing processes. That's a long story short of saying, complicated way of saying, all the different parts of our brain and needed areas, they overlap with each other. So sometimes there's the misfires within that, the connection issues within that. That's what's going to cause the writing processes. Deficits are often within the area of expressing how you're writing, and that has to do with the process area for that is attention, auditory processing, executive functioning, verbal long-term recall, oral language, orthographic processing. Pretty much all the areas that we have for reading, especially these ones: orthographic, phonological, processing speed. Then you get the visual, spatial, and working memory. Pretty much all the different areas that are used for math as well. Poor writing achievement is not always the result of a disability, but inadequate instruction as well. What we're seeing is writing is one of the most complicated skills to teach. Most people, even professionals as myself who writes for a living, right? I got to write tons of reports a year. I still don't like to write. It's still a struggle, especially when I'm trying to explain things that I've never explained before. And that's something to me, what we're seeing is writing's a struggle for everyone. Writing's a struggle to teach even more so. And then on top of that, there's not really an established curriculum or interventions that or system and process that we have set up for writing. Important parts to remember about the effective instructional writing. Writing does not develop naturally. It must be explicitly taught, just like reading. So when it comes to talking, that develops naturally just by being around other adults. My kids, I got a 1-year-old and 2-year-old. They're already picking up information. They're already talking. They're already saying words, the words that I've said. They're repeating what I've said, and I'm repeating what they said more clearly, right? And just by that type of modeling and feedback loops, boom, my kids learn to talk. Won't happen when reading or writing. Simply increasing the amount of writing experiences for students is not enough. We got to actually teach specific skills, provide high quality writing assignments paired with effective feedback. Feedback is one of the most important things involved in any type of behavioral change, specifically writing. Again, because writing is very difficult to teach. Writing instruction should be differentiated to meet individual student needs. Writing instruction should be heavily focused on compositional skills, right? Planning, text production, how to edit, as well as spelling and writing skills. Um, you guys just turned in you guys' research article, and I know most of you guys hate proofwriting, right? Which is editing. Most of you guys, even myself. So these are the things that we got to teach young ones how to do. So I really talk about this in order for you to empathize when it comes to students, especially when they're talking about them having writing issues. It's like, well, we all kind of have difficulty writing. And I would usually I'm gonna say generalize. Most of the time when we do have writing issues, it's not a disability, it's instructional. Like, it's really important to establish that tier one's happening first for writing, especially if you're going to start qualifying kids in those areas for spelling or written expression. Spelling is a critical component of written expression, allows for students to clearly articulate ideas in writing. Some of the big problems with spelling, and this is why editing, like having grammar is really important, is because it interferes with the necessary higher order writing processes. So just like decoding interferes with the brain's so caught up in trying to decode information, it won't be able to comprehend what it's reading or understand what it's reading. The same thing for writing. If the brain's so fixated on trying to encode words, which is trying to spell words, trying to produce those patterns, it's not going to be able to focus on the other type of skills that we want to focus on, especially for expressing ourselves, which is planning, organizing, generating text. Misspelled words, they interfere, man. So they get in the way of me understanding what, of somebody understanding what's being read. But then also it gives a perception, right? When the person turns in a report, or when, say, I turn something in, I have misspelled words, people look at me weird, right? And they usually have some type of like snazzy comment, like, "Oh, you're a doctor." It's like, man, I'm not a dictionary. But yeah, it really gives people perception of that. Spelling problems may lead students to avoid writing altogether as they feel unsuccessful. So, especially if people's perceptions are thinking that you're maybe not as smart as you are because you can't spell, which is a joke. Well, that influences a person's confidence. And a person's confidence, self-efficacy, that has a lot to do with their motivation and if they're going to get started with an actual activity. Many traditional spelling and instructional practices are not validated by evidence, right? If you're trying to teach writing through a weekly spelling test, and then having the kids memorize that, and then test them on that, and then have them write it multiple times, it's not going to help them. The thing is with writing is it's not about memorizing words. We know that that's not how we read, right? We read through figuring out letter names first, then letter sounds, then decoding, and becoming fluent, right? There's the steps and sequences, and they're based on patterns, of phonetic patterns. Same thing for writing. Gotta have those phonetic patterns. If you're just doing the weekly spelling test, that is not spelling instruction. It's not effective spelling instruction. Additional research on spelling interventions is needed. Current research suggests that targeted spelling instruction can improve writing fluency and express writing skills. Handwriting is one of the areas. So research has consistently rapid and correct information of letters, right? Being able to rapidly link and form letters with your hands to better handwriting. Many learners who struggle with writing struggle with letter formation. And it has a lot to do with your fine motor skills. I know it has visual, spatial, memory, concentration, but I think handwriting, it has a lot to do with your fine motor. If you're not really strong with your fine motor, imagine trying to put a needle through an eye, or put a piece of string through an eye of a needle. That's extremely fine motor. Imagine trying to do that for a long period of time. It's going to be stressful. It's going to make you anxious. Well, that's the same thing for other students who have handwriting issues. It causes a lot of anxiety. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to meet their sensory needs in order to decrease that tension. Remember, anxiety and tension come together. That's why you can use pencil grips. You see the interventions there. Composition skills, most complex and multifaceted component of writing process. In order to effectively compose writing, several underlying skills must be present. You got to be able to read, comprehend what you're reading. Man, that's important. So kids who have reading issues, kids who have decoding issues, it's only obvious that they're having spelling and written expression issues, because written expression is a higher level of reading. That's like the fourth step of being able to read. And you got to, in order to have good composition skills, you got to be at the fourth step of level of reading. You got to be able to transcribe. You see those there. I'm going to go through them individually right now. Reading comprehension, again, is the ability to read. If you have difficulty doing that, it's going to challenges with reading comprehension will likely result in difficulty with knowing how to start the writing process, and then being meaningful with your writing. Spelling, revising is, again, super important. Transcription, it's the actual motor part of writing. It has to do with the typing and spelling as well, like actually being able to produce the words. So typing, writing. If you have problems with this, it can be slow and probably can't understand. People aren't going to be able to understand what you're writing. Sentence construction. In order to write effectively, students must be able to construct sentences that make sense. If you can't make sense with your writing, then obviously there's going to be many challenges. You're not going to be able to play incorrect placement, use verbs or tenses wrong, right? You're going to be able to put EDs where they shouldn't be, the S's where they shouldn't be. That throws people off. Run-on sentences, not using commas, not being able to use semicolons. Sometimes the writing's too simple, having incomplete sentences. Big problem. People can't understand what you're writing. You really can't when you don't have that on lock, especially punctuation. Content knowledge. Students must understand the content they're being asked to write about. So if they don't know what they're writing about, man, they're gonna struggle. If they don't have any type of knowledge about that area, what are they gonna? They're gonna just constantly have writer's block. Let me see how am I doing on time. I can't see. I'm gonna keep going then. All right. Come on, go up. Come on, come on. There you go. Planning, content knowledge, planning, writing in a multi-step process that involves initiating, planning, and editing to effect. Being able to plan what you're writing, man, that's so important. Is being able to the best way that I could imagine illustrate planning is having one of a map, one of those visual maps. Brain farting a little bit. Something visual to help anchor the center idea to other ideas. Self-regulation, connect, concentration. That has to do with the self-sustainability. If you have difficulty doing this, so if you have difficulty doing this, It's going to may cause frustration, and then you're going to have a difficult time sustaining how long you write. The big part of this is setting goals for how many words like you want to write per paper, and then sustaining that, just keeping on track to that. And that's a huge strategy of writing is short-term goal writing and taking a ton of breaks. So self-regulation and concentration should add self-awareness there. Here's the interventions. Intervention that so the first one is add a word for spelling success. It's a 5-step process, self-manage and improve spelling abilities. The goal of this is to improve spelling skills through individualized spelling lists, daily practice sessions, structured error correction, and progress monitoring. This is at the proficiency stage and aims to practice spelling words only after they have been initially taught. The design is small group individual, but it could be modified for whole class. So this has to do a large part of the initial training. First thing you need to do is pair students with similar spelling abilities and rotate the peers every couple of weeks. Explain that students will be practicing together and taking daily tests on their own spelling lists. So they're going to have their own individual spelling lists. Once a word has been spelled correctly on 2 consecutive days, the word can be removed from the spelling list. After 5 days, all words removed from the list will be re-added for practice. If words are misspelled, they'll be automatically re-added to the list. So this is the actual steps. First one, study. Student pronounces the word and looks closely at the spelling patterns, right? The spelling patterns are the phonetic sequences, the THs, things like that. Copy. Student copies the word into a spelling sheet and double checks the spelling. And then cover. The kid covers the thing, covers it, and then tries to write it from memory. And then once they uncover, and then uncover it. Did I spell it correctly? If I didn't, well, I have the students. Sorry, my dog's barking. Uncovers the word and then determines if the word is spelled correctly. Next, have the students practice all the steps in their pairs and provide corrective feedback and praise as needed. The next stage is the implementation. Implement the steps as detailed in the initial training phase. One second. Embarrassing. All right, let's get going. Implement the steps as detailed in the initial training process as possible. You got to be detailed in the training process to establish it, or else if you don't, you're gonna have fidelity issues after that. After each intervention session, collect the notebooks and spelling lists to review for accuracy and guide future spelling lists. Research recommends 3 to 4 sessions per week for maximum student outcomes. Come on. Progress monitoring, using CBMs for this. And one way to do this is calculate the percent correct on weekly spelling assessments for the words practiced in the intervention. So you can use CBMs for spelling, or you can use weekly percentage correctly on the students' results. Important notes, ensure that initial training is appropriately completed before starting the intervention. 2 sessions, about 30 to 45 minutes in length, pretty long. The next one, self-regulated strategy development. SRSD is an instructional approach that teaches students a multi-step strategy: planning, writing, and revising. So it's connected intervention. Support skills as you have goal setting, self-instruction, and self-reinforcement. This sounds a lot like a behavioral intervention, which, of course, writing is a behavior. Intervention goals aims to improve overall narrative writing performance. So you want to get better at being able to narrate what's happening in your head. Considered a proficiency intervention. So what this is trying to do is make it more fluent practice, make a person more fluent what they're doing. So fluently practice a skill in the context of already learned writing skills. Intervention intensity. Intensive intervention for severe writing challenges. So most appropriate for one-on-one or small group, but it can be adapted for class-wide. Intervention is composed of 7 different steps that should occur sequentially. Initial conference. So first, tell students they will be learning a strategy to help them write better stories, right? Make it meaningful to them. Tell them why they're doing something. Lead a discussion of story writing that includes the 7 components of a story. The goal of the strategy is become better writers and the role of the story parts and improving the overall quality of a story. Pre-skill development, discuss the 2 major components of a story, setting and episode. Setting is the main characters, time, place, right? The episode, though, is what are the characters doing? What are the goals of the characters? What are the characters trying to achieve? What are their reactions? Demonstrate how to make a bar graph too. So then you have a visual to help anchor you, right? All the ideas to record the number of story parts included in the story. Discussion of the composition strategy. So review and distribute cue cards that list the following strategies. So you have even more of an anchor, visual anchors. You got an actual card in front of you. So the first cards, think of a story you would like to share with others. Let your mind be free. Write down the story reminders: who, what, when, where, why, how. Write the ideas of each part, and then write down your story using good story parts to make sure it makes sense. And then here's another story card, it's a mnemonic one, and it helps go more in depth with step 3, which is the who, what, where, when. Or who, main character, right? Who's the other characters? When does the story take place? Ancient times, Bible times, current, future? 10 years from now. Who knows? Where? Space? Amazon River? Baco? What do the main characters want to do? What do the other characters want to do? What happens when the characters try to accomplish their goals? Are they successful? Are they not? Everyone loves the comeback story. Everyone loves the Rocky type movie. How does the story end? Story endings, man, they can be whatever you want. But the best part is being able to express how the characters feel about their results, the ending. Modeling, share a story idea with the class and model how to use the strategy to develop the idea further while thinking aloud. So a lot of this is training students how to think. See, that's why writing is so hard, is because we're not trying to just get people to put random words on paper. We're trying to get them to think more clearly, right? We're trying to get them to think more organized. We're trying to get them to think more, to be more planned with their thinking. And a lot of that has to do with their self-talk. So the way to orchestrate that obviously is to model that. So you're modeling self-talk out loud. Involve students in the process by asking them for assistance and write a first draft of the first story on the whiteboard. Model the 5 types of self-statements. Again, working on their self-talk. What do I need to do? Planning. First, I need to think of a story to share. Self-evaluation. Does this make sense? Self-reinforcement. Man, people are gonna like this. I like it. And then coping. All right, man, I can write a good story. Think about that. We're working on their confidence too, their self-efficacy. Next, lead a discussion on the importance of what students tell themselves during the writing process. Have a discussion about that. Put it on paper. Anchor that to some ideas for the kids, right? That is a very important strategy. My hope is those 5 types of self-statements, you're using those too when you're writing. I hope you're saying I can write well. Ask students to write down several statements for reference. Memorization of the strategy in mnemonic, right? So this is part of the implementation. Divide the class up. We want them to memorize this. Have the pairs review the story parts in one or more of the students' previously written stories. So have them look back at what they've done. But the best part about progress monitoring is reviewing you're just reviewing your results. You're reviewing what you've produced. So beautiful, right? So have them go back and use those review those story parts in their old writings, and then provide corrective feedback and praise as needed. Collaboration. Have students continue to work in pairs to plan stories. Remind students that stories should include all 7 components, right? They have those cards in front of them. Once students complete a story, have them work together to determine which parts are included in the graph. Included, and then boom, graphic. Provide corrective feedback and praise as needed. Last step, independent performance. Allow students to continue using their cue cards and previously recorded self-statements as a reference, and encourage them to try writing without them. Right? We'll let them use those accommodations, strategies, the visual anchors. Try to get them to do without it. And then encourage students to graph, use the graphing process for 2 more stories. Progress monitoring, have students write a story based on a picture and score the written content on the following variables. Right? Just the 7 things. So main character, location, time, character's goals, achieve, or action to achieve goals, resolution, and the character's reactions. This is how you do the points. So each one of those areas gets 2 points pretty much. So 0 if the element wasn't present. You get a 1 if they kind of describe the main characters, and 2 if the element is highly described. And then you could add an additional point if the story contains 2 or more goals, more than 1 well-defined episode, and the story events occur in a logical manner. So about a total of 17 points. Important note, can be utilized as a partner intervention if desired due to a wide range of writing abilities or consistently low, so the gap is too big in the classroom. So have students break up into pairs and begin in stage 2. Planning strategy, last strategy, and then we're gonna jump into about maybe like 4 slides, 5 slides of the dysgraphia, dysgraphia lecture. And the reason why I don't have to go through the whole thing because they overlap. Intervention that focuses on the compositional aspects of good writing. Pick an area, organize thoughts, write and say no more. It's not prisoner of war, right? POW, that's what I originally thought. Think about that. We're trying to organize thinking, get people to think differently. Intervention goals aims to help students organize their thoughts, make writing a step-by-step process as opposed to an overwhelming process. And that's the solution to anytime you have a problem, right? Chunk it up, make it step-by-step. And it automatically decreases the anxiety because it keeps you present on the present task. Intervention intensity, appropriate one-on-one, small group, whole class setting. Consider proficiency intervention aims to fluently practice a skill in the context of already learned writing skills. Implementation. Start by having the student brainstorm writing ideas. Consider providing parameters. Right? Brainstorm. Get them together. Talk. Discuss. Intervention teacher may wish to start modeling by thinking aloud. Really topic. Again, you're modeling how you self-talk. Thinking aloud is self-talk. Have the student generate a list of topics. Provide cues or questions as needed to support this process. Once the list is complete, have the student cross off the list, split the least appealing topics, and select one of the remaining ones. Model to organize thoughts into an outline. Focus on using 3 main ideas. One at the top, one in the middle, one at the edge, one at the end of the page. Think about it. Get a piece of paper. Put 3 main ideas on one at the top, middle, and then have them fill it in. Boom. Get them organized. Have the student organize thoughts in the same outline and provide corrective feedback as needed. Then, once you do that, the intervention teacher should describe their thought process on how to answer who, what, when, where questions regarding the writing assignment. Think about that. Writing is usually all the same. Most of these interventions can contain the who, what, where, when, and usually why. Model how to determine if writing makes sense or not. Students should begin writing with support and immediate feedback from the intervention teacher. Focus on feedback should be on the content though, right? Don't pick at them with their spelling or penmanship. This is trying to get them to think differently. Remember, if they focus on the spelling and the penmanship, it's going to get in the way of their thinking. So we need to get them attached to that, especially if they have the spelling and penmanship issues. Provide a student with a cue card that outlines POW, right? Another visual anchor. During the next writing session, work with the student again, but do not provide modeling, right? You want to make it more independent. Give corrective feedback and praise as needed. Progress monitoring is curriculum-based measures for written expression, must allow for planning time prior. So this time you're going to give them time to plan and should evaluate for organizational structure of writing. You can also use classroom examples. An important note for this is intervention teachers must ensure they are frequently and explicitly modeling what they are thinking throughout the intervention process. So again, you're modeling your self-talk. That's one of the main ways to train people on how to think differently. You know, you got to think about this. This is really what cognitive behavioral therapy is based on. A lot of our mental health strategies are based on this type of stuff, modeling, same type of framework. Boom. All right, next PowerPoint. Dysgraphia. Students heavily rely on writing emails. Obviously, we've already covered the importance of it. 60% of the school day engaged in students spend 60% of the day engaged in writing or fine motor tasks. Most challenging skills is writing. Again, everything I've been saying this whole time. And we're only 50% of the kids in the nation are at the basic level of writing, right? That's a concern. Males have been found to be lower than females. And think about that. Fine motor isn't long-term fine motor skills isn't a male strength, right? We're larger motor. We're running. Think about that. We were hunters before. So that's, I mean, it's really you see a lot of difference in our genetics too. This is why the scores are disproportionate. There are several core processing abilities required for effective writing: attention, executive functioning, sequential processing. We already covered that, and they all overlap. There's the brain stuff. Dysgraphia is a specific learning disability in the area of written expression. It often includes problems with letter formation, legibility, letter spacing, spelling, fine motor coordination, rate of writing, grammar, and overall sentence production. Well, I think most of us struggle with all that. Can be development or acquired though, right? So it could be developmental, so deficits occurs despite adequate learning opportunities. Rambo. And then acquired is say they have a major injury or a degenerative condition. Preschool, these are dysgraphia signs. These are signs. This has to be really bad for a preschooler who's had a lot of instruction already, though. They've been taught. This is like second, third year instruction, you know. Because even if a kinder comes in with that, I'm like not concerned. If they come in with that, say they've had little preschool exposure, they have these issues, it's kind of like, oh, okay. Awkward penmanship, fatigue with quickly writing, you know. Elementary, illegible or messy handwriting. Again, that's very common. Letter transpositions, very common for poor readers too, right? That means they're reversing the B's or they're getting the P mixed up with the B. Mirror writing, slow writing pace. Same thing. Most kids have the struggle with issues. They need a lot of erasers. Secondary, poor planning and organization skills, discrepancies. They're really good at talking, but their writing's not that good. I feel like that's me too. Difficulty keeping pace when taking notes. Yeah. Does not separate ideas but paragraphs, so on and so forth. There's 3 different types. First one has to do with fine motor, which impacts the voluntary execution of skilled fine motor and movement required for writing. And then it gives you the different parts of the brain impacted that. But yeah, so people, this is going to have to do with them not being able to write like clearly, be very messy writing, and I bet you they feel anxious when they write. Bet you. Next one, this is like the dyslexia. This is like the phonetic dyslexia. This is they really can't do this. Have the phonemic awareness or phonologic awareness, and they can't have it's hard for them to get those phonetic patterns. And then when it comes toward like the orthographic processing, remember orthography is being able to look at a symbols, 3 symbols together and being able to say, oh, okay, I know what that is. NFL. I don't see NFL. I see National Football League because that's connected. My brain's logged that NFL stands for that representation. So when I see certain words like flower, I see that connected already. My brain's not decoding it. I see it. I recognize it. I know what flowers are. It's immediate. Well, some students have those issues. So they have issues like with laugh. So they're writing LAF instead of laugh, LAUGH. They haven't memorized that. They don't have that skill, fluency skill. And then there's a mixed dysgraphia. So there's three different types of dyslexic graphia. So it's the one with the phonetic issues, the one with the orthographic issues, which is the difficulty with the laugh, and then there's mixed with this both. Same thing with this dyslexia, the same type. Executive dysgraphia, this has to do with their higher level skills. So resulting from deficits in working memory and executive functioning skills, which greatly hinders written output. Primary writing deficits include verbal retrieval. So retrieve stored words and word categories. They have difficulty doing that. They have difficulty with recalling spelling cues or maintaining formation in the mind long enough in order to just put it on paper, in order to type it or write it out. Then organizing and planning. If you have difficulty in those areas, so that is executive dysgraphia. Here's the assessment measures. So Pfeiffer, then they have the same academic achievements, a little fine motor, so that's the VMI and the NEPSI. The VMI, those aren't the most reliable, but it is what it is. Hardly any of this stuff's reliable, but it is what it is. Then you have the NEPSI, Brief 2, decafs, WIS 4, RAML, decafs. And I would heavily rely on what's out there too with what your teachers use. A lot of this stuff, it's only reliable if we've done our tiered processes. And then once you've done your tiered processes, you review the data and the progress monitoring from those tiered processes, and then you use these tools. Here's some books. And then here's a webinar from Dysgraphia. All right. And that is it. Peace with some chicken grease.